Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dhruti and you're watching Skyline. There are days when the world changes because of a war. There are days when it changes because of an election, and then there are days like today, when one decision after another, taken in different parts of the globe, well, it quietly begins to reshape global politics, security, and even your future. Tonight, we have 9 big international stories. Everyone's story is connected to another. Some will affect global market, some can influence war, and some may directly impact Indians living abroad. So stay with me till the very end, because tonight's Skyline, that is not just about understanding what's happening. It is about understanding why it matters to you. Now let's start with our top story tonight. Well, the entire West Asia has witnessed many surprises over the past few years. Countries that were once bitter rivals are now sitting across the negotiating table. Old enemies are reopening diplomatic ties, and today, another unexpected development has caught the entire world's attention. This time, the surprise has come from Iran. That's right, Iran has openly supported Saudi Arabia's right to develop very peaceful nuclear technology. Well, just a few years ago, if you remember, such a statement, it would have maybe had been impossible. Iran and Saudi Arabia spent years competing with each other. They backed rival groups in different conflicts and often found themselves on opposite sides of regional politics. But today, well, they may be appearing to be one. Why is this announcement important? Because it comes at a time when the US is trying to negotiate a civil nuclear agreement with Saudi Arabia. President Trump, he wants Riyadh to move closer to Washington under a deal that could include peaceful nuclear cooperation. But one important condition is that US wants Saudi Arabia to normalize relationship with Israel by joining the Abraham Accord. And that is where the story becomes even more interesting. Iran is now saying that every country has the right to use nuclear technology for peaceful purposes. At the same time, Tehran has accused Israel of opposing nuclear cooperation across the region. Now, the statement has added fresh diplomatic pressure on Israel, which has consistently opposed the spread of nuclear technology in West Asia because of its own security. And yes, in the meantime, Saudi Arabia has made its own position very clear here. Riyadh continues to say that any normalization with Israel depends on meaningful progress towards the creation of Palestinian state. In the meantime, Israeli Prime Minister Mr. Netanyahu, he has repeatedly rejected that idea, making negotiations even more complicated now. So today, we are witnessing something remarkable. Iran is supporting Saudi Arabia's nuclear ambitions. America is trying to bring Saudi Arabia and Israel closer together. Israel remains cautious, and the Palestinian issue that continues to stand at the center of every major diplomatic conversation. This is no longer just about nuclear technology. It is about shifting alliances, changing power equations, and a West Asia that is once again being reshaped before our eyes here. The decision taken today could influence regional security for years to come. And yes, in the fresh accusation, Iran has said something that can damage the United States' superiority image. Modern wars are no longer fought only on the battlefields. We have repeated this many times. Today, they are also fought through satellite images, intelligence reports, and competing narrative. Sometimes one image released from space, it creates as many questions as a missile strike itself. And that's exactly what has happened now. Fresh satellite images have reignited debate over the impact of Iran's recent missile strike on an American military installation in Jordan. According to reports published by Military Watch magazine, the images appears to show heavy damage to an aircraft shelter at King Faisal Air Base. The reports comes after Iran's IRGC claimed that one of its missile attacks had successfully hit a shelter housing an American F-15 fighter jet. Now, this is where it becomes important to separate the confirmed facts from the claims. The satellite images have recently raised fresh questions here, but they do not independently confirm that an American F-15E Strike Eagle was destroyed. US have not really confirmed the whole attack And that means the claims remain unverified, even though the discussion surrounding them has grown much louder. But even without the official confirmation here, ladies and gentlemen, military experts, they are closely studying these developments. Why? Because the images have once again highlighted an important question facing every modern military. Can even the world's most advanced air bases remain fully protected against precision guided missile attack? Well, for decades, fighter aircrafts were considered among the most powerful symbols of military dominance. But today's conflicts, they are changing the rules. Long-range missiles, drones, hypersonic weapons, and satellite-guided systems are forcing every country to rethink how it protects its most valuable military asset. A fighter jet is only effective if it survives long enough to take off. If missile systems can strike aircraft while they are still inside their shelters, then even heavily protected air bases that becomes more vulnerable these days. And that is why military planners across the globe are watching this story very carefully. Whether Iran's claim it is ultimately proven right or wrong, one reality has already become clear. Modern warfare, it is entering a new era where speed, precision, and intelligence may matter just as much as the size of an army. And yes, as tech continues to evolve, every missile strike is being analyzed not only by soldiers but also by satellites that are orbiting thousands of kilometers above the skyline. Now let's hop on into the United States. Big update from the US, ladies and gentlemen. Thousands of people had gathered for an evening of food, music, celebration. Families were enjoying their weekend in the US. In fact, children were walking between the food stalls that were there. Tourists were taking photographs near one of Seattle's most famous landmarks. Then, within seconds, everything changed. What should have been a festival of joy here, it suddenly became a scene of fear, chaos, and gunfire. A deadly shooting has shaken the city of Seattle in the United States. The incident took place during the famous Bite of Seattle festival. By the way, that's one of city's biggest annual events. According to the police, 3 people could not survive after being injured and 4 others are seriously injured after the whole scene erupted near the Seattle Center, just a short distance from the iconic Space Needle. Now, at first shot rang out, panic spread across the crowded venue. People who were enjoying food and live performances, they suddenly started running in different directions. Parents grabbed their children, vendors abandoned their stall. Some people hid behind food trucks while others desperately searched for safety as confusion took over the festival crowd. In fact, you know what? Videos circulating on social media show frightening crowd running as the shots echoed through the area, capturing the terrifying moment that unfolded in just a matter of seconds. After that, police responded quickly and confirmed that one suspect had been taken into custody. And yes, in the meantime, investigators also recovered 2 firearms from the scene. However, officials believe more than one person have been involved in the exchange of gunfire, and they say another suspect remains at large. The investigation it is still ongoing as authorities work to understand exactly what led to this whole incident. But you know what? Incidents like these once again bring America's violence debate back into the spotlight. Every time this type of event, this type of massacre takes place, the same difficult question returns. How do such attacks continue to happen in a crowded public spaces? Are existing security measures enough? And what more can be done to prevent ordinary families from being victims while attending a community event that basic? Now, for the local residents, it is not just about another headline. It is another painful reminder that even places meant for celebration, it can suddenly become crime scenes. Families who left home expecting an evening of music and food instead witnessed one of the most terrifying moments of their lives. And yes, as investigators, they continue their work. An entire community is once again searching for the difficult answers. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to the West Asian conflict here. The battle in West Asia, it is becoming more complex with every passing week. It is no longer just about missiles and fighter jets. Drones have become one of the most important weapons in modern warfare. They can fly for hours, monitor enemy movement, launch precision strike and gather valuable intelligence. but they have also become prime targets too. Yemen's Houthi movement have now claimed that it has successfully shot down a Saudi-operated Bayaktar Akinci combat drone during an alleged military mission over Al Jawaf province in northern Yemen. According to the reports carried out by Iran's state broadcaster IRIB, the Houthis say that the Turkish-made drone it was carrying out what they described as hostile operation before it was intercepted by their air defense system. The group has also released a video, by the way, that it says shows the drone crashing to the ground in flames. However, it is very important to point out that these claims have not been independently verified. As with many developments in active conflict zone, different sides often present competing versions of events, making independent confirmation extremely difficult. Even so, the claim itself is significant here. Well, the Bayaktar Akinci, it is considered one of Turkey's most advanced unmanned combat aerial vehicle. It is capable of carrying precision-guided weapons, flying at high altitudes and remaining airborne for a very long period of time. If such a platform becomes increasingly vulnerable to air defense system, military planners across the region they may be forced to rethink how these expensive assets are deployed. Well, the conflict in Yemen it has already expanded far beyond the country's border. What began as a domestic civil war, it has gradually drawn into regional power. In fact, global military alliances and international shipping routes. Every drone intercepted, every missile launch, and every strike reported that now carries consequences that extend far beyond Yemen itself. This is another reminder that warfare is changing rapidly. Not long ago, advanced drones were seen as nearly untouchable. Today, armed groups are claiming that they can detect, track, and destroy the world's most sophisticated unmanned aircraft. Whether every claim proves accurate or not, one reality that is clear. The race between offensive technology and defensive system that is becoming faster than ever before. And yes, while regional tension continue to rise, another report now suggests that even the United States may be thinking its military strategy against Iran. The reason, according to reports, that is not diplomacy alone, but something much more practical here. Well, for weeks, the skies over West Asia have echoed with the explosion, missiles, drones, and airstrikes that have become part of the daily headline. Every night brought reports of fresh attacks. Many believed that this war it would only become bigger, but suddenly something changed. The airstrikes stopped, and that has raised one important question. Is Washington preparing for peace, or is it simply preparing for its next move? Ladies and gentlemen, according to multiple reports, the US has temporarily paused its military strikes against Iran after nearly 5 months of conflict. Well, the development has surprised many observers here because just 2 days earlier, if you remember, the war appeared to be moving towards even more dangerous phase. Instead, there has been sudden pause now, creating fresh speculations about what is happening behind the closed doors in the US. In the meantime, one explanation that is being discussed is diplomacy. Reports suggest that communication between Washington and Tehran may have been resumed, raising hopes that negotiations could once again replace military action. But another explanation has attracted even greater attention. According to reports from CNN and the New York Times, concern over shrinking supplies of key military equipment may also be influencing American strategy. Reports suggest that stockpiles of Patriot interceptors and other defensive weapons have come under increasing pressure after months of continuous operations here. And let me tell you again, this is important to understand what this really means. Modern wars are not fought only with soldiers. They are also fought with logistics, manufacturing and supply chain. Every missile launch has to be replaced. Every interceptor used to stop an incoming attack has to be manufactured again. Even the world's most strongest military cannot operate without maintaining enough equipment for future emergencies. And that is why military planning is just as much about factories and stockpiles as it is about fighter jets and aircraft carrier. Reports also say that President Trump was presented with plans for another round of strike but chose not to approve them immediately. Instead, he has continued to say that Iran faces a choice between negotiations and even stronger military action if the talks fail. And at the very same time, senior officers they have reportedly warned about the risk of expanding the conflict further, specifically at a time when tensions have already spread across West Asia. And this whole war, it is no longer limited to Iran and the US. Fighting has expanded across the whole region. The Houthis continue to launch attacks. Military activities around the Strait of Hormuz remain tense. Shipping routes have been disrupted. Gulf countries remain on alert, and every new development is increasingly concerning about global energy supplies and international trade here. So, has America really stepped back from the battlefield, or is this simply a temporary pause before another phase of the conflict begins? At this moment, nobody knows the answer here, but one thing is becoming increasingly clear. Wars are not decided only by military strength, they are also shaped by political calculation, economic pressure, and the simple question of how long a country can sustain the cost of fighting. Ladies and gentlemen, when we think about America's biggest challenges, we usually think about what? Inflation, immigration, or politics, right? But today, another crisis is quietly unfolding, one that can affect the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. This time, concern is not war, it is about water. And experts say one major American city is dangerously close to running out of it. The city of Corpus Christi, located on the Texas coast, home to more than 300,000 people, it is now facing one of the most serious water shortages in the history. Years of drought, rising demand, and delays in developing new water resources have pushed the entire city into a difficult situation. Officials are warning that without long-term solution, the pressure on water supplies it could continue to grow. And how did things reach this point? The answer lies in the combination of several problems happening at the same time. Climate change has brought repeated droughts across Texas, leaving the reservoirs with much lower water level than normal. At the very same time, the city has experienced rapid industrial growth. Large pharmaceutical plants require a lot of water every single day. In fact, one chemical facility reportedly uses much water for cooling in a single day as much as city's entire population consumes. Though officials had hoped to reduce the pressure by building a large desalination plant that would convert the seawater into drinking water. It sounded like a long-term solution, but the project has faced repeated delays because of funding challenges, environmental regulations, and public opposition. As the delay continue, the city's water reserves. Now, as the delays continue, the city's water reserves continue to shrink. Residents are already being asked to conserve water. In fact, restrictions have been placed on activities such as watering garden and washing the cars. Authorities have even warned that if conditions become worse, emergency measures could eventually include temporary shortage or limited water supply hours. Can you imagine living in the world's richest country and being told that access to water itself, it may be uncertain? But perhaps the biggest lesson from this story, it goes far beyond one American city. Around the globe, climate change, population growth, and industrial expansion are putting increasing pressure on natural resources. Water, something many of us take for granted every single day, is slowly becoming one of the most valuable resources of the 21st century. Experts say here that Corpus Christi is a warning, not just for America but for the entire world. Because today's local water crisis could become tomorrow's global challenge if governments fail to plan for a future where demand continues to rise while natural resources continue to shrink. For years, Silicon Valley was the place where every ambitious engineer wanted to work. The biggest dream was to build the next billion-dollar app. Investors poured money into social media, online shopping, and software companies. But today, something remarkable is happening. The money is moving. The priorities are changing, and America's next technology boom is no longer being driven by smartphones or social media. It is being driven by the war. Ladies and gentlemen, the US is making one of the biggest defense investments in modern history. According to reports, the country is preparing for a military budget worth about $1.5 trillion, while companies working in defense technology, aerospace, and artificial intelligence are witnessing an unprecedented surge in investment. At a time when many traditional tech companies are laying off the employees, defense related industries are expanding rapidly. But this isn't just about buying one tank or building more fighter jets. The future battlefield is changing, and so are the technologies being developed. Governments are now investing heavily in AI, autonomous drones, cybersecurity, quantum computing, in fact, satellite communication, and next generation missile defense system. The soldiers of tomorrow may rely just as much on software engineering as they did on combat troops. Can you think about it? Every modern missile needs advanced software. Every military drone, it depends on AI. Every satellite requires engineers, programmers, and cybersecurity experts. This means the defense industry is now competing directly with companies like Google, Microsoft, and Amazon for highly skilled technology professionals. Reports also suggest that defense technology startups attracted billions of dollars in private investment over the past year. These companies are offering high paying jobs, often with salaries significantly above the national average here. The message is becoming very clear here. America's next technology revolution may not begin inside a social media company. It could begin inside a defense laboratory. Now, let's look at what this really means for Indians and foreign professionals living in the US here. Well, there are both opportunities and limitations. Many sensitive defense jobs require US security clearances, making them inaccessible to most foreign nationals. But that does not mean that global talent is left out. The rapid growth of dual use technologies, that means software, AI, satellite communication, robotics, and commercial ship industries, it is creating thousands of new opportunities in sectors connected to defense but open to international professionals. For investors, the shift is equally important. While Wall Street is increasingly moving money into aerospace, defense manufacturing, and infrastructure instead of the consumer technology now. In times of geopolitical uncertainty, these sectors are often viewed as safe long-term investment because governments continue spending on national security regardless of economic cycle. The world is definitely witnessing a historic transformation. For decades, tech shaped warfare. Now warfare is beginning to shape tech. And if this trend continues, the biggest innovation story of today's decade, it may not emerge from entertainment, but from defense and national security. In our last segment, whenever there is a war in West Asia, most people immediately think about missiles and oil tankers, right? But very few realize that a conflict thousands of kilometers away, it can quietly affect home loans in America, investment in India, even the money that NRIs send back home every single month. And that's exactly what is happening today. According to reports, the US Federal Reserve has decided not to reduce interest rate in 2026. Reason is simple: inflation remains too high. Rising energy prices, driven largely by continued tension in West Asia and disruption around Strait of Hormuz, have kind of increased transportation costs, manufacturing expenses, and food prices across the US. As inflation stays elevated, the Federal Reserve believes that this is not the right time to make borrowing cheaper. Now, you may wonder that why should somebody sitting in India care about American interest rate, right? Well, the answer is because the US economy, it influences financial market across the globe. Even interest rates remain high in America, the US dollar usually becomes stronger. Investors prefer keeping their money in the US assets because they offer better return. As more money flow into the dollar, currencies like the Indian rupee often come under the pressure. Well, for NRIs earning in dollars, this can actually bring some advantage. Every dollar they send to India converts into more rupee than before, increasing their purchasing power. Buying property, supporting family members, or investing back home may suddenly become more attractive because the exchange rate works in their favor. But yes, there is another side in this story. High interest rate also mean expensive loans, mortgage rate in the US that remains well above previous level, making it harder for people to buy homes or refinance existing home loan. Families planning to purchase their first home may now have to wait significantly higher month reinstallment as compared just a few years ago. The stock market, it also reacts differently in a high interest rate environment. Companies that depended heavily on borrowing money, specifically many tech firms, often face lower growth. And at the very same time, investors increasingly shift towards government bonds, energy companies, and other safer investment that offer stable income to them. And this is why central bank decisions are watched so closely across the globe. One announcement made in the US can influence property prices in Texas, investment decision in Mumbai, stock market in New York, and even remittance sent by the NRIs to their families in India. And this is how interconnected today's global economy have really become. And yes, speaking of dollar and the rupee, our final story tonight explains why the falling value of Indian rupee is creating both opportunities and hidden risk for Indians living abroad. When people hear that Indian rupee is falling, the first reaction is usually worry. They think that important goods will become expensive. They think foreign travel will cost more. They think the economy is under pressure. And yes, all of that is actually true. But there is another side to this story, one that millions of Indians living abroad should pay a very close attention to. Because sometimes what looks like a crisis for one, it can become an opportunity for another. And right now, the Indian rupee is trading close to the historic lows against the US dollar. Several global factors are responsible to this. That means rising oil prices due to the West Asian tension, foreign investors pulling money out of Indian market, and higher interest rate in the US that has all put a lot of pressure on rupee. As a result, every dollar now converts into significantly more rupees than it did just a few months ago. Now, let's understand what this means in a simple way. Suppose you are an Indian who's working in the United States. Every month you earn your salary in dollars. Earlier, $1 it bought fewer rupees. Today, the same dollar gives you much more purchasing power in India. Suddenly, buying a house, investing in property, or helping your family financially, that becomes much easier because your money stretches further. Take the example of real estate. Ladies and gentlemen, reports suggest that an apartment worth about 3 crore rupees today in India requires far fewer dollars than it did when the rupee was stronger. Without the property price changing at all, the exchange rate itself has made the purchasing power cheaper for NRIs. That is why many overseas Indians are once again looking towards cities like Bengaluru, Hyderabad, Gurgaon, and Mumbai for investment opportunities. But yes, before anybody rushes to transfer money, there is an important warning. Currency gains alone do not guarantee profit. Buying property without understanding tax laws, it can quickly turn a good investment into a financial headache. India's restricted taxation rule, FEMA regulations, and limit that every NRI must understand before making major investment. And with that, we have reached the end of today's Skyline. Ladies and gentlemen, these may seem 9 separate headlines to you, but together they tell you one powerful story. A missile fired in West Asia can increase fuel prices across the world. Rising fuel prices can influence inflation. Inflation can shape the interest rate. Interest rate can move currencies. And currency movement can change the investment decision of an Indian family living thousands of kilometers away. That is the world we live in today. A world where every headline is connected to another. A world where understanding global event, it is no longer optional. It is now essential for you. I am Dhruti Yatri. This is Skyline. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay aware, and I'll see you in the next episode.